Jesus. What the fuck? It's tight. What's going on, YouTube people? Today I have an Instagram follower that came in with his car needing some lowering springs and underglow installed. Today I'll be focusing on the lowering spring install for you guys. The car is currently parked in front of my garage, so I'm gonna need to get my car out of the garage and replace it with the other car. Let's open the garage. And in case you were wondering, I think this is still leaking air. It's been parked like this for like 4 or 5 days. And it doesn't really look like it's dropped. We'll check in a second. But I will be installing the lowering springs and the underglow on that car right there. Let me go park this thing somewhere so that I can get my car out. Oh man. This brings back memories. Here's a little known fact. My second car was actually a 2010 Toyota Corolla. It was the first car that I ever financed. And let me tell you, this brings back a lot of memories. This looks like a decent spot to pull into. Be right back, buddy. It is hot and bright out here. It actually feels good compared to the rainy days that we've been having lately. Now it's time to see if this thing's leaking air. I actually haven't started this car in almost a week, so hopefully it's fine. No, it's fine. Alright, time to check on this guy. It's fine-ish. It lost a little bit of air, but nothing crazy. I don't know what happened to that leak, but I think it's fine. Alright, let me drive this thing. Ooh, look at that. It's like entering a wormhole. I'm gonna go park right over there. And hopefully I can make it all in reverse. I love driving in reverse. Ooh. 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 That's the beautiful sound this car makes. Let me tell you, reversing and driving with one hand is so easy. Oh my god, I could do this all day. That should be good enough to air out. I almost didn't straighten out the wheel. I'm gonna let the Mercedes sunbathe a little bit today. It looks so good in the sun. I love it. Alright, let's go move that Corolla. Since we got so much room over there now. This thing is in the garage and ready to be jacked up. First thing I need to do is put my stock wheels back where they belong, over there where that wrap is, because it is gonna be in the way when I'm laying down. I got those wheels up and out of the way. I've been meaning to do that for weeks now, and that took me a whole, I don't know, 45 seconds. But sometimes you just overthink things and it makes you really unmotivated to do them, even though they don't take that long. I will be installing these Megan Racing lowering springs made for this Corolla. I don't exactly know the drop it's going to have, but the installation should be very similar to most front-wheel drive Japanese cars. Here's a word of advice for everybody that is new to installing car parts. When you jack up your car, you want to make sure that you put the jack on something that can be jacked up. Some cars, especially newer European or luxury cars, only have 2 jack points on it on each side. But a lot of the economy cars or Japanese cars seem to have a pinch weld all along the side, but only 2 really defined jack points. So you can jack it up from anywhere on the pinch weld, but you want to make sure to put the jack stands on the jack points. As you can see right here, this is the pinch weld that sticks out from the bottom. But the jack point is right here, where there's a notch here and there's a notch on the other side that kind of is reinforced compared to the rest to hold the car up. Same thing back there. Alright, now that it is flying in the air, it's time for me to take off all these wheels, put them up, and get started on the suspension. I have built the great tower of tires. That means this car is ready to remove the suspension. The front suspension is just your typical MacPherson suspension with the 2 bolts right here, no upper control arm, and then 3 bolts at the top. So that should be pretty straightforward to remove. The rear is always a wild card on these type of cars. And this one is with the spring on the strut. So the bottom is just one bolt right there. And then the top one has one that I can access from right here, but the other two I have to access from inside the trunk. For safe measure, I will be spraying these two bolts with some PB Blaster, just so that when I get to it, it's not too hard to break them loose. I'll also hit the back ones with this. On this particular car, I'm using a 22 mil, and I'll be using this huge Jesus bar to break it loose. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those two bolts were on there super tight, but I got them because I am super strong. Tien's out here wiping his car because she's a sweet person.
Sometimes it may be good, sometimes it may be shit.
Exactly.
Here's a mega pro tip. If you have problems removing bolts from anything in your suspension, use a jack to get rid of the tension that's on it so that it can just slide out like this. See? If this was not there, there would be so much tension I wouldn't even be able to hammer it out. And then, look how easy that comes out. Let me get the top bolts, and then we'll be set with the front. The top area is a little bit tight, so I didn't get to film much of it, but it's pretty straightforward. You take these nuts off of the bolts, and that's about it. This is the last one. All right, now we're gonna slowly but surely remove this strut. Also, don't forget to take off that end link like I just did. On this car, I actually didn't need to remove the whole liner. I only need to pop the back seats down and then move the liner just in one spot. Right here, I move this over, and there's one bolt right there, and there's two right there. That's all I need to remove. Same thing on the other side. Here you can see staff of the apartments admiring my car. This guy actually got out of it to check my fitment. Now he's going to the back. I think he approves. Alright, after getting all those nuts and bolts out, I got the rear suspension out of the way. That one's right there. Now I need to get these springs off of the struts. I will be using spring compressors that you can rent at any auto store. I believe these are from AutoZone. If you don't know how to put these on, I'm gonna show you real quick. You wanna make sure you loosen these up a bit, just to make them longer and have more travel. Also, I will say this, if you don't have an impact gun, this is gonna be a very hard task to do, because with the wrench, you're either gonna run out of strength or run out of energy, because it is a lot of impacting when you're compressing a spring. Now, spring compressors are fairly dangerous, so you wanna make sure you do a couple things right in order to be as safe as possible. You want one to be exactly on the other side of the spring so that you have even load on both sides. Also, you want to make sure that this is as straight vertically as you can get it with the spring, or else you're going to have a weird tension once it starts to go sideways. And finally, you want to get as much travel as possible on the clamps, because if I only had this much, I'd only be able to tighten this much, and if it's not enough, it's gonna blow the top out when you try to loosen it. So get as much surface as possible. You wanna make sure you even out the load when you compress it. So I'm gonna go on this side, and then before going all the way, I'm gonna go on this side. And then you keep doing that. Could you imagine if you didn't have an impact, this would be really hard. Once you feel it really loosen the top hat, it's pretty much ready to release without having too much tension. So I'm gonna remove this little dust shield right here. Delicious. I'm gonna pop this out. It might jump a little bit, but we'll see. Aim it at the wall. Now we're good. Now I'm gonna loosen up these spring compressors slowly like I did when I was compressing. Now that it's disassembled, I have access to the bump stop. And when you lower your car on lowering springs, this thing tends to bottom out very easily because you are way closer to compression with the lowering springs. So I'm gonna cut off about an inch and a half from the bump stop. This doesn't affect the performance of it, it's just gonna prevent the car from having any travel issues. Time to put the new springs on. They are labeled. Usually they're a fairly different shape front and back, so you should have a decent idea as to what they are. Also, there's usually words on it, and the way that you read it is the way that it faces up. So if it's upside down, when you read it, it's probably upside down. So this way is the way it's supposed to sit. There's usually a groove at the bottom of the bucket to line up the spring. Some cars it comes off, some cars it's already part of the metal. And then you can see that it's not lined up 100% in the middle. That's actually the design of the suspension in this car. And then we're gonna put the cut bump stop back in at the bottom. And then the dust boot. And this thing also lines up with the top. Finally, we're going to put the hat on. And this has a little alignment tool as well with the notch for this little piece of rubber at the top. Now that we have all of this set up, I've tried off camera to compress it with my arms, but I'm not able to get it all the way, so I'm gonna have to use the spring compressors again. Same thing, except these are a little shorter, so I have to go a little lower, and I'm not able to compress as much, but it's plenty since these are shortened springs compared to OEM. Now that the spring is on, I need to make sure that everything is aligned just to be safe, because you don't want to jeopardize the geometry of the suspension. So the bottom is still lined up. This top part is also lined up with that. And then the notch is still in here, and this is torqued down. These are the things you need to pay attention to when you install new springs into your strut. The rear suspension is actually a lot longer of a spring, so it's gonna be a little bit easier to get the spring compressor on it and compress it, but I do think there is more compression down here, so you gotta be a little bit safer in the rear on this car. I was only able to get full length on one side, and I had to lose one of the rings on the other side, but it's still fine to compress. I'm just gonna be using 2 different sockets because they are wedged against the edge, and if I take them out, it's gonna be a lot harder to put them back in. The rears are ready to go in. It's the same exact process as the front. Same thing, you wanna make sure you align the bottoms with the bottoms. Make sure that you align the top rubber with the top of the spring. And if you have problems remembering where everything goes, because there's a lot of little parts that go on springs or even any installs, take photos with your phone before you remove everything. That way you can always go back and try to identify things that you might not remember where it goes. The rear one is assembled. Everything is lined up just like the fronts. I'm going to put this back in the car and align everything properly. Bada bing, bada boom. The rear is done. Time to move to the front. This one has a bit more stuff to line up. I got all 4 springs on the car. Everything is bolted super tight. That one's on. This one's on. The other side is also on. Here, let's walk with my fingers. See right there. And the last one is on. Now all I have left is putting the wheels back on and seeing this ride height. Now that the springs are installed, you can see that the car has significantly dropped. But when you install lowering springs, especially if they're brand new, the car will keep on settling for about a week. So what you see now might not be the final result. This car might drop another ½ an inch. So even though it does look lower now, it might be even lower in the future. But thank you guys so much for watching. My hands are gross, I'm gonna go wash them.